The White House was already buzzing before sunrise. Phones rang, coffee steamed, and polished shoes echoed through the West Wing corridors. Caroline Leavitt, the youngest press secretary in U.S. history, walked briskly toward the press briefing room. Files pressed to her chest, jaw set tight. It was just another high-pressure morning. Foreign media awaited a response on the Taiwan Strait crisis, and 3 senior advisors were fighting over what she should say. But what happened next had nothing to do with diplomacy or politics. As Caroline turned the corner near the Roosevelt Room, she nearly collided with a janitor pushing a cleaning cart. She barely noticed him at first. Mid-stride, she muttered, "Sorry," and kept going. But then she heard it. "Ting dui nega win jen." Her Mandarin was rusty, but that meant "watch that document." She froze. Behind her, she heard the same. Voice say "Cuidado con es archivo." Spanish this time. She turned. Then came, softly, with near Parisian grace, "Faites attention à ce dossier." French. Caroline blinked. The janitor, mid-70s, thin, slightly hunched. Dark cap low over his head, was calmly wiping the edge of a trash bin. His eyes didn't meet hers. "Excuse me?" she asked, confused. He looked up at her, calm and emotionless. "Be careful." "With that file, ma'am," he said, in perfect, unaccented English. "People have died over less." The hallway stood still for a moment. Then, as if nothing happened, he adjusted his gloves and wheeled his cart away. Caroline stared after. Him back at her office, she asked her assistant Paige, who's the new janitor in East Wing rotation. Paige raised an eyebrow. "New old man, wears a blue cap. Looks like a ghost from the Cold War." Paige smiled. "Oh, him? He's not new. I think he's been here longer than the chairs. Doesn't talk to anyone." He spoke too. "Me," Caroline said. That night, long after the cameras and lights had turned off and the press had gone quiet, Caroline returned to her office. Her mind wouldn't let it go. Something about that man, his calm, his languages, his warning, it wasn't right. She logged into the White House internal personnel database. She filtered for custodial and maintenance staff. Then she filtered. By age 65 plus, nothing. No match. She searched through archived security credentials and scanned for his face, using facial recognition software available to her clearance level. Still nothing. How is that possible? She whispered to herself. Every person who entered that building had a file. Every contractor, every visitor, even the interns. She remembered his words again. "Be careful with that file. People have died over less." What file? Then a thought struck her. She opened the White House surveillance archive, keyed in the Roosevelt Room corridor, and scrolled back through previous days. For a while there was nothing out of the ordinary. Same people, same schedules. Then there he was, the same man, moving silently with his cart, except ... he wasn't cleaning. He was in the Situation Room hallway where janitors weren't allowed. 2 days earlier, he had been outside the Oval Office, just as the President and the British Foreign Minister exited a classified meeting. 4 days ago, he appeared inside the diplomatic prep room. During a high-level pre-brief with CIA liaison staff, Caroline didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. She kept playing the same clip on repeat, frame by frame. The janitor staring straight into the camera like he knew it was there, like he was sending a message. The way he stood calm, still aware. It wasn't the behavior of someone who cleaned bathrooms for a living. It was the posture of someone trained to observe. Someone who had spent years watching and remembering. By morning, she had already arranged a quiet meeting with her contact from Homeland, Secretary David Klein. He was one of the few people she trusted outside the administration. A former field analyst with deep surveillance clearance and a habit of asking the right questions. They met in the back corner of a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from the Capitol. David took one look at the still image Caroline slid across the table and frowned. I ran this guy's face through everything we've got, he said quietly. Nothing. No state ID. No social security. No prior visas. Not even a traffic cam hit. That's not possible, Caroline whispered. He's walking around the most secure building in the country. I know. David leaned in. Oh, he did find one thing. Not in the U.S. system. Old Russian military files partially decrypted Cold War records. It's not a confirmed match, but a photo from 1984 looks close. He showed her a younger version. Same eyes, same expression. He was listed under the name Sergei Aliyev. Caroline felt a chill. What was his job? Linguistics. Expert specialized in psychological conditioning through language, tied to a Soviet program known as Eidolon. She narrowed her eyes. I've never heard of that. David leaned back. That's because it wasn't supposed to exist. It was part of an off-the-books project. No paperwork. No confirmation. All we know is that the U.S. got wind of it in the late 80s, then tried to mirror it. Caroline looked out the window. Her world was shifting by the hour. He's not just a janitor. He's something else. But why now? Why appear after all this time? David nodded slowly. I don't know. But if he's back, someone either woke him up or never put him to sleep. Back at the White House, Caroline returned to her. Roll as if nothing had changed. Cameras clicked, microphones buzzed, reporters shouted questions. She stood at the podium and answered with practiced calm, all while her mind worked overtime. Later that afternoon, she passed the hallway again, the one where she first saw him, and there he was, pushing the same cart, mopping the same corner. She stopped, watched him. He didn't look at her, but he spoke softly under his breath. I've cleaned this floor for 15 years, he said. But it's the footsteps I remember. She moved closer. Who are you? He glanced at her. Just for a second. I used to ask that same question. To who? It's myself. Caroline took a slow breath. Your name? Is it Sergei? He stopped mopping. I've gone by many names, he said. But none of them matter now. She studied him. Why are you here? He finally looked at her fully, something sharp. In his eyes, because you're asking questions again. That means the silence is breaking. Before she could respond, he turned the cart and walked away. That night, Caroline accessed the president's internal schedule log classified level. She cross-referenced Sergei's appearances on camera with high-level meetings. Every time he appeared, there had been a confidential foreign diplomacy event. Then she noticed something else. Tiny inconsistencies in the transcripts from those meetings, word choices that seemed out of place. An awkward verb in a French translation. A formal tone shift in a Mandarin reply. Subtle, almost invisible. Unless you knew what to look for. Caroline realized something chilling. He wasn't just observing. He had been present during translation. Briefings, whispering corrections, changing inflection. Replacing one word with another. Tiny shifts enough to change meaning, intention, even trust. What if he had been influencing diplomacy through language? What if he had been altering meaning between world leaders? Caroline called David again. I need you to pull every meeting. Transcript from the last 2 years involving foreign leaders, especially the ones with our in-house interpreters. David didn't hesitate. You think he's manipulating the narrative? I think he already has. Just then, Caroline heard something outside her window, a slow, creaking wheel. She peeked through the blinds. No one there. Just the sound of an old mop bucket fading into the hallway shadows. She backed away. For the first time since she started this job, Caroline was afraid. Not of politics, not of war, but of the quiet man cleaning the floors, who might have already rewritten history with nothing but a whisper. Caroline's fingers hovered above the keyboard. She hit pause. Zoomed in on his face. The same blank expression. Always calm, always unnoticed, but always there. The last clip she reviewed made her stomach tighten. It was from a week ago, 3:41 a.m. He was alone. No cleaning cart this time. Just standing still in front of a security camera at the far end of the West Wing's lower hall, looking directly into the lens. Unmoving, as if watching her. Caroline leaned back in her chair, pulse rising. She grabbed her phone and texted an old DHS contact. Need facial ID check on an unlisted WH individual. Possible breach. Sensitive sending frame. A minute passed. Then her contact replied, "That man shouldn't exist." Who the hell is that? Caroline stared at her screen. Outside, sirens wailed, somewhere distant. Inside, silence. And far down the hallway, just beyond her office window, the faint echo of a mop bucket wheel turning. The janitor was still here? Caroline's hands trembled as she turned off the monitor. She had spent all night reviewing transcripts and comparing video footage from diplomatic meetings. The more she looked, the more terrifying the pattern became. The janitor Sergei had been present during over a dozen meetings between the president and foreign dignitaries. Not once as a recognized interpreter or staff member. Yet his movements, his presence, and most alarmingly, his subtle vocal prompts always in the background lined up with moments where political tones shifted. In a private call with the French ambassador, casual remark about joint defense had somehow turned into obligated military response. In a summit with the Japanese delegation, the phrase economic preference was translated as economic obligation. In each case, it could have been dismissed as a harmless translation error. But now Caroline wasn't so sure. She printed one transcript out, then another, then another. Next to each one, she wrote a note. Sergei. Present, minor lexical shift. Tone manipulation. A knock on her door broke the silence. It was Paige. Press is waiting in the East Room. You've got 6 minutes. Caroline nodded, folding the papers into a folder marked personal and slipping them into her bag. As she walked through the hallway, she kept her eyes open. Every corner, every hallway shadow, every maintenance door. But the man was gone, at least for now. The press conference was routine. Questions about the economy, Ukraine, the administration's new tech regulation bill, but Caroline couldn't focus. Her eyes kept drifting to the back of the room to a black uniformed security guard who seemed too still, too quiet. Him, when the questions ended, Caroline rushed off stage, pulled her phone out, and called David. "We've got a problem." "I'm already in it," David said, his voice tense. "You were right. I just traced a Signalan embedded audio pulse across the White House's internal comm system." Caroline frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means someone's been piggybacking real-time language streams during key briefings, redirecting or layering subtle corrections barely noticeable." Caroline's blood went cold. "Like, Sergei?" "Yes," David replied. "And it gets worse. That tech isn't American. It's Russian-designed but modified. Post-Cold War, hybrid frequency bending. Someone installed it inside our translation booths." Caroline felt dizzy. So he wasn't just there, he was guiding what world leaders heard. "More than that," David said. "He might have been changing intent." Imagine shifting the meaning of a word during a tense diplomatic exchange. Suddenly, peace sounds like surrender. Assistance sounds like control. Caroline whispered, "This isn't sabotage. It's linguistic warfare." That evening, she attended a closed-door strategy meeting with the Chief of Staff and the National Security Advisor. She didn't bring up Sergei directly but she asked a question. "Do we verify the translations in real-time recordings?" The advisor, a sharp-eyed ex-military analyst, looked surprised. "We cross-check summaries." "Sure." "Why?" Caroline replied carefully. "I've noticed inconsistencies. Slight language drifts between transcript and recording." The room went quiet. The Chief of Staff asked, "Are you saying someone is altering our official communications?" Caroline hesitated. I think we should take a closer look, just to be safe. No one dismissed her, but no one jumped on it either. That was more dangerous than denial. It was quiet consent, fear of rocking the boat. Later that night, as she left the West Wing, she took a different path. Down the side hallway, past the diplomatic preparation room. The lights were dimmed, sensors on low power. She paused near a utility door. It was unlocked. Inside, nothing but cleaning supplies. But at the back, almost invisible in the shadows, was a small metal panel screwed into the wall. Too new to match the rest of the room. She gently pried it. Open inside was a black device. No label, no brand. Just a single blinking blue light. She took a photo, closed the panel. Then she heard it. A whisper, just behind her. You weren't supposed to find that? She spun around. Sergei stood there. No mop, no cart. Just him in silence. Caroline swallowed. Why are you doing this? He smiled faintly. 'Cause you stopped listening to truth. You replaced it with control. Whose control? She asked. He stepped forward slowly. Everyone's yours, there's mine. It doesn't matter now. The damage is done. Caroline's voice hardened. You're manipulating diplomacy, rewriting messages. Between nations. That's war. No, Sergei replied. That's prevention. Real war begins when people understand each other too well. Misunderstanding keeps peace alive. She stared at him, stunned. He leaned in closer. Tell me, Caroline. Happens when people finally hear the truth. Then he walked past her, disappeared down the hallway. She stood alone, shaken, and for the first time in her career completely unsure who the enemy was. The next morning, the West Wing felt colder. Caroline sat in her office, the blinds drawn, reviewing the photo of the device hidden in the wall. She had emailed it to David the night before. At 2:13 a.m., he replied, confirmed Russian-manufactured subfrequency relay. Designed to piggyback real-time voice streams. It's no doubt this is Eidolon tech. Caroline stared at the screen. Eidolon, the Cold War program no one had dared mention in years. A ghost operation, weaponizing language. Not with bombs or bullets, but with shifts in meaning, tweaks to trust. Now it was here. In the White House. In Sergei, that was even. His real name was walking freely through the most secure building in the world. She couldn't go to the FBI yet. Couldn't go to the CIA. Not until she knew who had let him in. If the system was compromised, any move could trigger the wrong alarm. Or worse, get her killed. Later that afternoon, she met David in a parking garage near the Navy Memorial. Just like old movies. Shadows stretched long between the cement pillars. David wore a cap low over his face, a scarf pulled up to his cheekbones. You found another relay device. Caroline nodded. In the Roosevelt room, inside, a ceiling vent. Same tech. No fingerprint trace. David rubbed his temple. This wasn't just Sergei. Someone brought him in, gave him clearance. That doesn't happen without top-level cooperation. She whispered, You think someone inside the White House is working with him? I think someone above the White House might be, he replied. That device, it's not transmitting locally. It's routing data through a private satellite, a foreign one. Caroline's stomach dropped. Which country? David hesitated. Then handed her a slip of paper with a frequency ID. She pulled out her phone and searched the registry. Not Russia. Not China. It was flagged as a Swiss diplomatic tech satellite. It's privately owned. But that wasn't the part that scared her. The owner listed was Veritas Strategic Holdings, a shell company once linked to a retired NSA director. The same man who had pushed for the White House to internalize all diplomatic translations under the Unified Comms initiative back in 2019. Caroline whispered, We built the system they're using to attack us. David nodded. We trusted the wrong architect. That evening, Caroline walked the halls of the West Wing again. This time, carefully she passed the usual faces: assistants, Secret Service, interns. Everyone moved like it was a normal Thursday. Now everything felt suspicious. It's too smooth, too quiet. Then she turned a corner and nearly collided with him. Sergei, he wasn't in janitor's uniform today. He wore a suit, fitted, pressed. He looked light staff. "You've changed," she said. He smiled. "So have you." They walked together like old friends. Caroline whispered, "You were a ghost for 20 years. Why reveal yourself now?" "Because silence has its limits," he replied. "And real truths, always time-bound." She looked at him carefully. "What are you planning?" He didn't answer. Just gave her a sealed envelope. "When you're ready to listen, read this in private. And remember, meaning is more dangerous than weapons." Then he was gone again, back in her office. She locked the door and opened the envelope. Inside was a transcript. At first, she didn't recognize it. Then her eyes widened. It was from a summit in Geneva, 2 years ago. President Biden, French President Macron, Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau. A casual lunch turned closed door. Negotiation on NATO restructuring. The official transcript listed it as a routine discussion, but the document Scott gave her was different. Slight changes in phrasing. One phrase stood out. Official, the alliance remains a neutral bond. Sergei's version: the alliance remains conditional. A single word. But in diplomacy, that changed everything. Neutral meant steady, stable. Conditional meant temporary. Vulnerable, Caroline flipped to the back page. Typed in a clean, quiet font. "You buried this. We didn't." She felt her hands go cold. This wasn't just about changing the present. This was about rewriting the past, and if Sergei was telling the truth, the media, the administration, even Caroline herself had unknowingly lied to the public. Her phone buzzed. Unknown caller. She hesitated. Answered. A calm, emotionless voice said, "You've opened the file. We suggest you stop." Then it hung up. She stared at the phone, heartbeat pounding in her throat. No threats, no screaming, just certainty. They knew. Caroline closed her eyes, took a breath. She wasn't just part of the story anymore. She was the next chapter. ChatGPT said Caroline didn't go home that night. Instead, she stayed in her office, the lights off, blinds closed, staring at the files Sergei had given her. The words on the paper felt heavier than any press question she'd ever faced. Conditional. A single shift. One diplomatic twist changing not just policy, but global perception. It wasn't just a transcript. It was proof of manipulation, embedded within the system she had sworn to protect. She paced slowly, her thoughts racing. If Sergei was retanned, if Veritas Strategic Holdings had ties to the translation, Relay Tech, then this wasn't foreign sabotage. It was deeper, internal, engineered by people who had long since left public view, but never left power. Picked up her phone and called David again. "We need to talk." "Not here." 2 hours later, they met in a small 24-hour diner in Arlington. Booth in the back. No cameras, no digital devices. David slid a manila folder across the table. Traced 3 more documents like the Geneva file. One in Berlin, one in Cairo, one in Beijing. Caroline opened the folder and scanned the pages. All diplomatic sessions. "Yep," David nodded. And in each, the same pattern. Subtle language deviations that shifted the entire outcome of the meeting each time Sergei was nearby. But someone signed off the final version internally, meaning Caroline asked. Meaning Sergei wasn't acting alone. He wasn't even editing the final drafts. Someone with White House clearance was finalizing these altered transcripts. Caroline leaned in. "Who?" David hesitated, then pulled out another paper. A clearance log. She read the name. Her stomach dropped. Deputy National Security Advisor Julia Keyes. Caroline whispered, but Julia's been on every major comms policy review. She testified to Congress about cyber interference. Exactly, David said. She helped design the anti-leak system that now prevents anyone from verifying what's real and what's not. She's not a guard dog, she's the architect. Caroline felt dizzy. We're in a closed system. And she holds the only keys. Back at the White House the next morning, Caroline tried to play it normal. She gave the usual morning press notes, walked through the media hall, but her mind was somewhere else. She watched as Julia Keyes entered the Roosevelt room sharp, as always, dressed in gray, her phone always in her left hand. Caroline followed. "Julia," she said lightly, "got a minute?" Julia turned, smiling. "Of course. Everything okay?" Caroline shut the door behind them. "Do you remember Geneva, the NATO lunch?" Julia's expression didn't change. "Course. Why?" "I've seen an alternate transcript," Caroline said. "One where neutrality becomes conditional. One where Sergei was in the room." Julia paused for just a second, so slight it could have been missed. "That's not possible," she replied, tone crisp. "All official language is reviewed by 3 departments, including mine." Caroline stepped closer. "But what if the review process is the insertion point?" Julia's smile faltered. Caroline added, "You've been finalizing edits using access no one else has. Hidden relays, foreign satellite links." Julia sighed, then looked directly at Caroline. "You're smart. Smarter than I thought." "That's a problem." Caroline's pulse spiked. "You knew." "I guided it," Julia replied, voice dropping. "Not for money, not for politics, for control. The world is too unstable to leave peace in the hands of flawed men yelling at each other across language barriers. So we smoothed it. Directed tone, adjusted intent." Caroline's voice cracked. "You changed diplomacy into fiction." "No," Julia said. "We turned chaos into stability. With precision. You think anyone at the top tells the truth anymore? We're the last editors of reality." Caroline stared, speechless. Julia moved to the door. "You'll be offered a choice soon. Stay silent and you stay safe. Fight this and the story becomes about you." She left. That evening, Caroline. "Got a call? Private number. This time a different voice. Female, cold, direct. You've seen enough. You know where this leads. You will receive a press draft tomorrow morning. You will read it as written. Do not mention Geneva, or Cairo, or Sergei." The line went. Dead. She stood in her office, the city lights of D.C. glittering behind her. Then a message pinged from David. "Power cut in surveillance room. Found this." It was an image, a still from a camera feed. Julia Keyes, in a backroom server bay. Standing beside Sergei, no mop, no uniform. Just the two of them, plugging in the device Caroline had found. Beneath the photo David had written, "They were never cleaning. They were programming." Caroline stared at her reflection in the glass. The next press conference was in less than 12 hours. And this time the real story wouldn't be on the paper in her hands. It would be hidden between the lines. ChatGPT said. Caroline sat at her desk, eyes fixed on the official press statement Julia's team had sent her. Was clean, sanitized, just another daily script for the American people. Foreign diplomacy. Wins, presidential resolve. A quick quote on economic recovery. Nowhere did it mention Geneva, or Cairo, or the satellite relay buried deep beneath Falstaff clearances. But Caroline wasn't the same woman she had been 2 days ago. She'd seen too much now, understood too much. The phone buzzed again. Da Vinci answered in a whisper. "Talk fast, I got a name." "The founder of Veritas Strategic Holdings," he said. "A guy who went underground after 2017. You ready?" "Oh, Ambassador Eli Grant." Caroline blinked. The name hit like a punch. "You sure?" "Triple checked," David replied. He was the architect of Operation Eidolon. He went off the grid when the project was buried, resurfaced in Geneva 2 years ago. And guess what? He was dining at the same table the night that altered transcript was created. Caroline leaned back in her chair, stunned. Eli Grant had once been a rising star at the State Department, fluent in 8 languages with a gift for rhetoric and manipulation. Then suddenly gone. No scandal, no obituary, no trace. Just erased until now, David continued. Sergei didn't betray the system. He was the system, built by Grant, hidden in plain sight. Caroline whispered, "You think he's here? In D.C.? I don't think. I know. His diplomatic tag was scanned last night. Langley meeting. 4 hours, then straight to the Capitol." Caroline's thoughts raced. If Grant was backhand, if Julia was working with him, then the rot went deeper than she had imagined. It's deeper than just mistranslations. This was engineered governance, narrative control, the rewriting of world events before they even unfolded. Later that morning, Caroline entered the press room. Cameras blinked to life. Reporters settled into their seats. Julia watched from the wings, arms folded, stone-faced. Caroline's hands were trembling. She adjusted the mic, looked up, began. "Good morning, and thank you all for being here." Standard greeting. Same tone. The words were steady, rehearsed. But her mind wasn't on the statement. She could see Julia's eyes boring into her. The paper in front of her outlined a list of talking points. She read the first few lines carefully, but then she stopped, paused, looked directly at the cameras. "There's something you deserve to know," she said slowly. "Something that was never meant to come to light." The room went still. In recent days, evidence has come to Mevidin suggesting that several official records from high-level international meetings were altered before being released to the public. These edits, while subtle, changed the entire context of those discussions, and they were not done by accident. The reporters shifted in their seats. Julia took one step forward from the shadows. Caroline continued, "This is not about party or policy. This is about truth. We may be living in a world shaped not by what was said, but by what was intended to be heard." Julia stepped into the press room. "Caroline," she said, calm but firm, "you're off script." Caroline looked at her, didn't flinch. "The American people don't need scripts. They need facts," she replied. "And right now, those facts are being filtered through people who believe control is safer than honesty." The cameras kept rolling. A reporter stood up. "Are you saying official White House documents were falsified?" Caroline nodded. "Yes." Murmurs erupted. She pulled out the Geneva transcript, the original, held it up. "This is what really happened at the NATO summit 2 years ago. The difference is just one word. But that word was enough to signal our allies to hold back on defense commitments. It changed the entire shape of European diplomacy." Julia was now walking toward her. "You're endangering national stability." Caroline met her halfway. "You already did." Security began moving in, but paused unsure of what was happening. The cameras caught everything. Julia's eyes were burning now. "Do you think you're saving democracy?" Caroline whispered, so only she could hear. "No, I'm ending your version of it." An hour later, the video was everywhere. Social media, news outlets, breaking alerts on every screen in D.C. White House Press Secretary Leavitt blows whistle on global translation conspiracy. The Geneva file was leaked. Then the Beijing one. Cairo followed. The world reacted quickly. Embassies demanded clarifications. NATO issued a statement. And Eli Grant, the ghost behind the curtain, officially named in an internal Department of State memo classified but already leaking. Inside the West Wing, chaos ruled. Caroline sat alone in her office. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She picked up. The voice was familiar, calm, quiet. "Sergei, you did it," he said. "I wasn't sure if I should," she replied. "There's a cost," he said. But sometimes silence is the loudest lie. Caroline looked out the window. Asterisk. Rain started falling over Washington, D.C., thin streaks cutting across the press room windows, as if the city itself was trying to wash something away. Caroline stood before her office mirror, her blouse slightly wrinkled, the lines under her eyes deeper than ever. The fallout had begun, and it was unlike anything she could have imagined. News outlets across the world had seized the story. Some called her a patriot, others a traitor. Hashtags with her name trended next to words like disinformation, deep state, translation, and treason. By noon, the president had released a carefully worded statement distancing the administration from unauthorized disclosures. Julia Keys, meanwhile, had vanished. No public statements, no appearances, no trace. Caroline knew that wasn't a good sign. The president's chief of staff entered her office without knocking. His face was pale, jaw tight. "You need to resign," he said. "Today." Caroline didn't flinch. "No, this isn't a negotiation. I don't need one," she replied, standing. "What I said wasn't classified. What I revealed didn't compromise operations. It exposed them. You exposed the machinery," he hissed. "Now everyone's watching the gears instead of the screen. That's the point." He threw a folder on her desk. Inside were articles, internal polling, intel reports showing diplomatic chaos abroad, European leaders unsure of past promises. Were real, Asia demanding transcripts. African Union representatives suddenly rereading every deal from the last decade. You burned the world's confidence in U.S. diplomacy for one news cycle. "No," Caroline said softly. "I revealed the people who had already burned it." He stared at her a long moment, then turned and walked out. Later that night, a secure message came through her encrypted device. No sender, just an address. A small brownstone in Georgetown, once owned by a former intelligence director. Caroline arrived at midnight. David was already inside. So was someone else, Eli Grant, Alive.com, wearing a worn gray coat like any retired professor. He poured tea, then sat. "You've made quite a noise," he said, "which means you're ready for the second part." Caroline didn't respond. Grant continued, "You were right to out Julia. She lost perspective. We designed this system to refine language, make diplomacy smoother. Not to rewrite intent, but you let her rewrite it anyway." "I left the project in 2018, he said. "It evolved without me. Until recently, I didn't even know Sergei was still in it." "You're lying." Grant smiled. "No, I'm obsolete now. You're the system's voice, whether you like it or not." Caroline's fists clenched. "What do you want from me?" Grant leaned forward. "I want you to lead the transition." She blinked. "What transition?" He nodded toward a folder on the table. Inside were documents, a framework, a system that used AI, human oversight, and linguistic matrices to track real-time international communication across embassies, summits, and back-channel negotiations. Transparent, auditable. "Dangerous. You want me to install a new layer of surveillance," she said. "I want to prevent what happened from ever happening again." David spoke up. "This is how they trap you, Caroline. They make you the cure to the disease they gave you." Caroline stared at the folder, the power it offered, the danger. "Who else knows this exists?" she asked. "Only a few," Grant said. "But if you don't take it, Julia or someone worse will. Someone already building version 2 in some bunker." She stood, heart pounding. "No, I won't fix their mess just to become part of it." "You already are," Grant said, sipping his tea. "Now decide what kind of role you want to play." The next morning, Caroline appeared on live television again. Same chair, same backdrop. But this time, no statement in hand. She looked into the camera and spoke slowly. "You don't need to believe me. You just need to start asking the same questions I asked. She listed the cities Geneva, Cairo, Beijing. She listed the names Sergey, Julia, Eli Grant. And then she said the most dangerous words in Washington. I will not resign. Within hours, her credentials were frozen. Her access cut, her office sealed. But it didn't matter. Because the truth was out now. And in homes and cafes and bunkers around the world, people were watching, reading, wondering. And only some were remembering. Remembering times they'd thought something felt off, a word misused, a phrase that caused an overreaction, a silence that followed a lie. They remembered. And when they did, they no longer dismissed it as error. They now suspected design. Weeks later, a new broadcast aired, not from NBC, not from CNN, from an anonymous network. Encrypted, Caroline. Now underground appeared again. Behind her, a wall of names, incidents, transcripts. Language is how we share peace, she said. And also how we weaponize it. Pause, but the truth is stronger, and I'm not done yet. The screen flickered. Signal lost. But the echo remained. And in that echo, the world began to listen for the first time with new ears.